So for week 5 paper, in this question number 1, you have to open up the bracket for the top and the bottom. So for that case, you'll have a p to the power of -5 divided by p to the power of 12 and q to the power of -8. And since the p is bigger at the bottom, so it's going to be 12 minus -5. And then we realize there's only one q, and that q is negative. So make it positive, we'll just simply switch it to the top and it will become positive. So the final answer will be q to the power of 8 divided by p to the power of 17. So 3 marks for that. Then making it the subject, so open up the brackets first. So 10h plus 60k equal to 7h plus 9. And get the h's together. And then 10h minus 7h is 3h. And finally just divide that number over. Okay, but realize that actually in this case all of the terms is a 3 is a common factor, so we'll actually factorize the top first by pulling out the 3 from both terms so that I can simplify it. So h is actually finally 3 minus 20k. Okay, so continuing number 3, we have to make the common denominator here. So that requires the 4x minus 3 to be multiplied over with the 6, and then the 3 would be multiplied by the 1 minus 8x, and then the denominators will multiply each other. And like I said in the previous video, you don't need to simplify the denominator, just leave it as 2 brackets, it's fine. Okay, all you need to do now is to multiply the top, so 24x minus 18 plus 3 minus 24x. And then again, the 24x is gone, so negative 15 is what we have left with. So 1 minus 8x, 4x minus 3. Then for number 4, for A, always realize what is common inside the terms first. So we can see that there's an x that's common, so taking that out leaves x squared minus 4y squared, and that's a difference of square. So x plus 2y, x minus 2y. And then in part B, it's nothing to do with part A, so just do the calculation on that. So it's x minus 2y, x plus y. And then in part C, they're asking you to combine the part B's question answer, and then you can see that the part A actually is a negative sign out there. So literally you copy part B's answer, x minus 2y, x plus y, and also because of the negative sign that's out, so it's negative x plus 2y, x minus 2y. And finally, you can see that there's a common x minus 2y there. So that's going to be pulled out, leaving the negative x and the x plus 2y. So we have to multiply that back in. So negative x squared minus 2xy will be the leftover from the second bracket. For the inequality question, we multiply the -4 over, and when we multiply -4 over, remember that we have to change the sign. So the -4 is going to actually multiply by 1 minus 2x plus 2, and then multiplying that back in. So 1 plus 2 is 3, so it's a -12, and multiplying the -2 gives you plus 8x. Then so 8x minus 3x, -2 plus 12, so we got the 5x and the 10, so x is basically 2. Let's put the back in its correct place. And then I'm going to do simply moving the 8 on the other one, so make it 20, and then it's a 5. So since it's an AND question, we need to have the number line overlapping, so that's going that way. is there, so and so therefore that would be the answer. So for B, they're asking how many odd numbers are satisfying it. So there's a 3 and there's a 5, so it's only 2, which is 3 and 5. Then for number 6, they're asking us to find the difference in the number of male students and the female students. So obviously you need to make use of the total number of students, 1106, and the relation of 25% less than the male students. So first of all, the statement, let x and y be the number of male and female students. Then, so first equation is the total people there, and the second one is female, which is y, is 25% less than the male. So you can write down y is equal to 0.75 m. Actually, we don't use m, we use x. So you use substitution method there. So x plus 0.75, x is 1106. So simply divide that by 1.75. You find the value of x, and then you substitute back into the first equation, you find the value of y. And then they're asking for the difference. So the difference is 632 minus 474, which is 158. So for question 8, we will be using a few theories. Okay, so one of them is when we deal with parallel lines. So in here, with the tell us that AB and CD is a pair of parallel lines. So you will recall corresponding angles, alternate angles, and interior angles. Okay, and then the other thing you realize that in this topic, when you deal with the ratios of arc, you will be also relating them to the angles ratio at the center or angles ratio at the circumference. And finally, you will also use, because you can see that this is a four-sided shape which fits right into a circle, so you will also learn the opposite angles of cyclic quadrilateral, which tells us that the opposite angles inside a circle would be added to 180, meaning like this angle A and angle C would add up to 180. Okay, for that we will look at it later. So how are we going to do this question? Okay, so as I said, it's a pair of parallel lines, and then the ratio of AB is 2 and AD is actually 3. So what does that tell us? So since the arc AD, which is 3 ratio, is making an angle at B, so this angle is also of a 3 ratio, and likewise AB is making an angle at D, so that is of 2x. Actually, you can also see there is actually the big angle B all the way to D, and that is covering the 2 ratio and the 3 ratio together, so that makes it 5. So actually this angle is 5x. Okay, so once that's done, and then finally we know that this is 110. Actually, we will now find out what the value of x is. We can go 2 ways now, because we can see the ABD triangle. Okay, this triangle here actually is equal to 180, or we can add these two up together using the opposite angles of cyclic quadrilaterals, and we can see that it's also 180. So it's up to you which way you want to do it. Okay, so in this case, so let's assign that angle ABD is 3x, and angle ADB is 2x. These are both because arcs proportional to angles at circumference. Okay, this is a short symbol for circumference, and then with the help of, actually we can also write down the angle BCD as well, which is 5x, same reason. Okay, they all have the same reason. And then 110 plus 5x is 180. That's due to this reason here. And x we can then find is actually 14 degrees. Okay, and with this piece of information, what we're finding, we are just finding CBD. So CBD is actually this one here. So we are actually finding this angle Y. So angle Y plus 3x plus 5x is actually 180, because this is interior angles of triangle, interior angles, and because we are using a pair of parallel lines, AB parallel to DC, and we can actually find what exactly Y is, because minus 8x and x is only 14, so we will be able to solve what Y is. So 8 times 14 is 112, so that makes the answer 68 degrees for the angle Y. Okay, so we have used, in this case, we have used the interior angles, we have used the opposite angles of cyclic quadrilateral, and then we used arcs are proportional to angles at circumference. Okay, so this allowed us to use interior angles, this allowed us to use opposite angles of cyclic quadrilaterals, and then because the four-sided shape inside a circle allowed us to use the opposite angle of cyclic quadrilateral. Number 10 is much more straightforward, more typical to what we are used to doing. Let's first make up the gx equation, sum of two parts. So the first part is varying as x, so the k1 constant is with ax, and then the other part varies also directly because it didn't say inversely. So that's the equation that I can make up for gx. And then they tell us that gx is given in two ways. So when it's g2, the answer is 32. So g2 means x is 2. So when we use x as 2, the answer is 32. And then when we use the x as -5, the answer is -10. And now you can just pick up your calculator and then use program number 1, and that will enable you to find K1 and K2. It's 12 and 2. Okay, so if it's 12 and 2, then we can now go ahead and find the value of G -6, which is what the question asked for. So 12 -6 plus 2 -6 squared. So that's -72, and then this is plus 72. The answer is 0. That's it. That's for part A done. And for part B, they're telling us to find gx when its answer is -18. So gx means the original gx equation, which is 12x plus 2x squared. So first of all, move all the terms to one side. Okay, here you can realize that there's a common 2 in all terms, so we can take that out first. 0. Okay, and then it's actually a perfect square. So there's a answer of -3, which is repeated. So there's two answers, -3, repeated. Okay, and finally for number 11. So number 11 is actually a question that is copied from the 2019 DSE paper. So in that paper, they told us that fx is a cubic polynomial. Okay, and also they told us two conditions, that when the fx is divided by x plus 1, the remainder is 7, and then when it's divided by x minus 4, the remainder is 87. and that it also gave us that it's divisible by something called x squared plus 3x plus x. So, but in this case, they haven't given us what fx actually is, okay? All we have is it is a cubic polynomial. Cubic means it needs a x to the power of 3 polynomial, and then basically it's telling us two conditions of when it's f negative 1, the answer is 7, and then when it's f4, the answer is 87. But that is if we know what fx is. So actually what we need to use is the last statement, okay? So it's divisible by this thing called x squared plus 3x plus 1. So that's actually your divisor. Okay, and if you remember, an equation of polynomial should have a divisor, it should have a quotient, and it should have a remainder. But since in this case it says the word divisible, that means there's no remainder, but there should be a quotient part, okay? And since the fx is a cubic polynomial, so x to the power of 3, and since the power on the divisor is only x to the power of 2, means there is still a x term left that would need to be there to make it a cubic polynomial. So for that reason, we have to multiply a x term to it. And when we do so, we don't just multiply the x term, but also any terms that's lower than the x term, which is the constant term. So, but we don't know what they are, so we have to multiply ax plus b to this polynomial to make it a cubic polynomial. Okay, so now fx is really a cubic polynomial, and by making this cubic polynomial, we actually created two unknowns. Okay, two unknowns, but perfectly they gave us the things we need, because f negative 1 equal to 7 and f4 equal to 87 will actually help us solve what a and b is, and therefore we can find the full equation. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So f negative 1, so negative 1 squared plus 3 negative 1 plus 1, a negative 1 plus b is actually equal to 7. And similarly, we can do it on the side with the 4. So 4 squared plus 3, 4 plus 1, a bracket 4 plus b equal to 87. Okay, so we have to expand that now. So negative 1 squared is 1, 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 minus 3, negative 1. And when you multiply it to the terms inside the bracket in the next one, you have to change the sign because it's a negative one. So negative a become positive a, and the positive b become negative. So we have a minus b equals 7 left over from the first part. And from the second part, 4 squared is 16, 16 plus 12, 28, plus 1 is 29. So this side is a little bit more complicated, but 29 is divided over to the other side. So 87 divided by 29 is actually 3. So we actually have a simultaneous equation to solve again using our program number 1. A is 2 and b is negative 5. And for that reason, the quotient, which is actually this part, is equal to 2x minus 5. That's it. And then in part B, they're asking us to solve the equation fx. And fx is actually looking up like so now. So if it is equal to 0, can we actually solve it now? Because basically in part B, we need to create a situation where you have two brackets. And actually in this case, we have those two brackets. So we don't even need to expand it in this case because they don't have a remainder. Because we, in the part B, we always need to make a fx equation that has no remainder. And that has been done so for us. So actually we'll just have to solve them. So the first one, let's do the linear one, that's easier. So it's 5 over 2. So that is a rational root. And then for the next part, we need to either use our calculator, or because they're asking us for rational roots, we can use the quadratic formula, the negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a to show that whether it's a rational root or not. So after the calculation, actually we find out that because the square root 5, it cannot be simplified, and this is regarded as a irrational root. So really there's only one rational root in this case, so we'll answer only one rational root, because this is an irrational root. By using a calculator, you can see it's a rational root because it gives you a very long number, decimal number, that is never repeating its pattern, and because it's not repeating its pattern, it's a irrational root, and we use a quadratic formula to show it, and therefore answer the question, there's only one rational root.